Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones you can't solve right now, and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go, and drifting into sleep. Before we get on with the show, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to ask you for a little bit of support. If you are finding Sleepy Time Tales helpful to you, to help you to catch up with the sleep, and you have the means to help out, to help me keep it going, to keep it ad-free, and to reach thousands of insomniacs just like you every week, please consider supporting it on Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. This is a monthly support that not only helps me keep the lights on, but can get you fun bonuses based on how much you contribute. From as little as $2 a month, you get weekly access to early release on the main episodes, so that you get your fresh sleep aid on a Wednesday instead of a Sunday. And $5 gets you weekly bonus minisodes, special edits, and a monthly megasode, which is all the month's releases in one big listen. The most recent person to join the Patreon crew is Misty, who joined up recently. Welcome to the team, Misty. Thank you for your support, I'm very grateful. And here's to many more well-rested nights for you. But of course, monthly support might seem like a big ask. So if that seems like a bit much for you, and you can also make one-off tips through buymeacoffee.com/sleepytimetales, or the tip jar on the website. I've also got some merchandise up on a TeePublic store, which you can reach through the show notes or via the website at sleepytimetales.net. But another huge way to help the show that doesn't involve any kind of financial contribution on your side is simply to spread the word. You personally can help me in my mission to give more people a restful night's sleep, to help me do my small part, to do our small part in improving people's lives. So if you know someone who's struggling to sleep, you can just tell them. And if you do it on social media, please make sure to tag me in. That's at Sleepy Time Tales on Instagram or Twitter, so I can see and I can thank you and give you a shout out. Last but not least, of course, is the music, which is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiko. Their music is available on their website at loyaltyfreakmusic.com. Thanks for taking the time. Let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? What is this strange idea, this podcast you're supposed to fall asleep to? Lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. Sleepy Time Tales is intended to be used as a distraction to what keeps you awake at night. Or maybe you want something to use as background noise or to keep you company. That's why I make these episodes quite long, so that I'm here for you, without any pressure of the end coming. As far as I know, there are a couple of different ways to engage with the show. As I said, the primary idea is to give you something to focus on, a story or an event that lets you keep your mind on a specific point, to stop it from spinning out into stress and anxieties, to help you to focus just enough not to resist the embrace of a night's sleep when it comes for you. But maybe you need something different. Maybe one of those people that just needs some kind of background. People like white noise, sound of the rain, sound of the ocean. Or maybe what you need is just some boring dude droning on in the background. The one thing that's common, though, with however you're listening to the show is the important thing is that you don't try to force the sleep. Just keep a light mental grip on the thread of the story and allow the need for sleep to come for you. Now, obviously, I'm hoping you're asleep before I get to the end of the episode, but don't feel pressurized. This may not work on the first night. In fact, it probably won't. I suggest giving it a solid 3 nights try to get used to the strangeness of it, to get used to my voice, my accent. Or maybe one episode, at least early on, it just isn't long enough. Or maybe your problem isn't so much going to sleep. Maybe you wake up in the middle of the night. What I recommend, because it's what works for me and what I do, is you download a whole bunch of episodes so that you've got them ready to go and put them in a playlist. And then, as you go to bed, start with the latest and let them run. That way you wake up and it's still going and you find yourself staring at the ceiling. You can just pop your earbuds in and allow yourself to go straight back to sleep again. You can even do the similar thing if you wake up before your alarm, 60 minutes or as little as 30 minutes. I recommend the same thing, and I've had people thank me, despite the fact that it seems like a strange idea. But while it seems like 30 minutes may not be all that handy, there is something about allowing yourself complete relaxation right before the alarm that's satisfying on a whole deep level. But it is very important that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, this may seem strange to you, so give it a chance. Because I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. This week, we return to Old Glass and How to Collect It by J. Sidney Lewis. Chapter 2. Early English Glass. The early history of glass manufacture in Britain is decidedly obscure. The earliest specimens of the art extant are certain coloured beads, known as agri beads. Many of these exist, some probably of Phoenician origin, others dating from the Roman occupation of Britain, being made either by the Romans themselves or by British craftsmen under Roman tuition. There can be little doubt that the Romans did introduce the making of glass into this country, for glass was an indispensable adjunct to Roman life. Moreover, it was the custom for the conqueror to train the conquered in his own arts, and the Roman handicrafts followed the Roman eagle. In any case, the art of glass-making had, according to Pliny, extended to Gaul, and there seems no reason why it should not also have crossed the Channel. Unfortunately, there is no evidence that it did. There is, however, evidence that glassmaking was carried on in Anglo-Saxon times. Many specimens of Anglo-Saxon beadwork, etc., have been found in barrows, tumuli, and burying places in general. They are composed of an opaque, vitreous paste, which in places approaches translucency. Unfortunately, the materials employed were impure, and the material has consequently disintegrated with time, making it a matter of exceeding difficulty to determine its original texture and appearance. The decoration, both as regards coloring and design, is primitive. The color is crude, and the patterns consist mainly of simple geometrical figures, circles, chevrons, stripes, spirals, and so forth. Possibly after the Roman withdrawal in 410, the art fell into abeyance, as did much of the civilization imposed by the Romans, reviving again when the various Anglo-Saxon units began to develop a civilization of their own, and to pass through various confederacies into a single kingdom. Bede writes that in 675, Benedict Biscop sent for glassworkers from France to glaze the windows of the church at Wearmouth, and that they taught the English their handicraft, making not only windows but vessels. The art must, however, have survived in certain places, for numbers of vessels which can be referred, on the authority of illuminated manuscripts, etc., to Saxon times are in existence. Such specimens include vases ornamented with ribs and applied lobes. These are probably of German origin and were introduced into Britain by the Saxon invaders. Trumpet-shaped cups, ribbed or stringed or fluted. These have no base on which to stand, and are probably of English manufacture, dating from the latter half of the 6th century. The third type is the palm cup, shaped so as to be conveniently held in the palm of the hand, having no bottom on which to stand, and bowls of various shapes. The palm cups and bowls belong to 8th and 9th centuries and later. It should be remembered that the dates given can only be roughly approximate, and that the various periods fuse into one another, so that there's no infinite line of demarcation. Moreover, there is no definite proof that glass vessels were made in England during Saxon times, save only such statements as that of the Venerable Bede previously referred to. Only, while similar vessels are found both in France and Germany, it is claimed that a greater number and a greater variety are found in England. The inference being that they were made in this country. So remarkable is the paucity of evidence, and so absolute the dearth of authenticated examples in these dark ages of glass manufacture, that it has often been asserted that no glass vessels were made in England before the 15th century. Glass vessels were, of course, known and used, but these were probably in the main, at any rate, imported from Venice in the East. On the other hand, it is known that before the 13th century window glass, blown glass too and not cast glass, was made, and very successfully. Indeed, Old English coloured glass was particularly fine, and this being so, it is not easy to understand why the same art should not be applied to vessels. Coarse glass vessels were certainly made at a very early date. The records of Chiddingfold refer to Lawrence Vitruvius in 1230, William de Verrier in 1301, and John Glasrith in 1380. The record, in its translation from Latin to Norman French, and then to Anglo-Saxon, has its philological interest as well, but it may be mentioned that John the Glasrith made both glass and vessel. There is too in existence an ancient cup of glass, disinterred from a tomb in Peterborough Abbey Church, which from the records of the abbey must have been buried there, in all probability, in the first half of the 13th century. In the accounts of Henry, the second son of Edward I, who died in 1274, there is mentioned the purchase of a glass cup for the sum of 2 halfpenny, a fact which seems to imply that to be sold so cheaply, the vessel must have been of domestic manufacture. It should not, however, be forgotten that the sum represented the daily wage of a skilled artisan in the 13th century. In the taxation roll of Colchester in 1295, 3 of the principal burgesses are referred to as verers, and it seems hardly likely that so many important citizens were merely glaziers and not glassmakers. However, it is more than probable that the use of glass was confined to the noble and wealthy, while the common folk used vessels made of wood, horn, or leather. The leather bottle has passed into a proverb, and the blackjack was so universal in its use that the French, naturally curious as to English habits, referred to us as a nation of savages who habitually drank out of their boots. It follows that the blackjack of the 13th or 14th century had few of the graces of its silver-mounted, an aristocratic descendant of the 17th century. It might even be further suggested that the English habits and customs in those early times were not such as to make a fragile drinking vessel either useful or acceptable. Those that did exist were probably rather valued curiosities than articles of everyday utility. There was undoubtedly, produced during this period, considerable quantities of window glass, much of it highly decorated, and exhibiting characteristics peculiar to the period to which it belongs, so that experts find little difficulty in distinguishing between the vigor of the 13th and the brilliancy of the 14th century. It would appear, too, that the home product won an increasing appreciation from the architects who employed it in their buildings. For whereas in 1547 the contractor binds himself not to use it for the windows of the Beauchamp Chapel at Warwick, in 1485 it is mentioned in such a way as to imply that it was either better or dearer, or both, than Dutch, Venice, or Normandy glass. In the 16th century, however, the fashion of using vessels of glass became almost universal in the west of Europe. Most of these came from Venice, and spurred by the desire of establishing so lucrative an industry at home, the rulers of various countries, notably France, Holland, and England, sought to induce Venetian craftsmen to settle in them. The glassworkers of Murano, the great glass-making centre in Venice, were, however, a close corporation, the workmen being stringently bound, under penalty of death, not to carry their trade secrets to any other country, or to teach them to foreigners. In spite of this, 8 Muronese glassworkers were induced to settle in England in 1549, and built their furnace in the monastery of the Crotched Friars, one of the minor orders. They derived their name, crotched, i.e. crossed, from the ornamental cross which adorned their habits. Of the 8, 7 returned to Venice in 1551, having previously petitioned the Council of 10 to remit the penalties against them. It is a reasonable assumption, but still only an assumption, that during their stay they did much to further the art of glass-making, although they merely produced glass and sedulously refrained from teaching them mystery. The Breviary of Philosophy, published in 1557, remarks, "As to ye glass-makers, there be scant in this land, yet one there is as I do understand, and in Sussex is now his habituation, at Chiddingfold he works by his occupation." Evidently, therefore, the old Sussex industry had survived. The product of the Chiddingfold furnaces was probably, however, a coarse green glass, and by no means to be compared with the Venetian article. In 1564, Cornelius Delanoy, an alchemist from the Netherlands, came to England, at the invitation of the government, to teach the art of glass-making as practiced in the Low Countries. He took up his abode and set up his furnace in Somerset House. He failed, however, with the materials then available, to produce any very effective results. In particular, the clay used for the pots failed to withstand the great heat required to produce transparent glass. Moreover, Delanoy proved to be more alchemist than glassmaker, and left various persons in England the poorer for their quest after the philosopher's stone which they had undertaken under his guidance. In 1567, Pierre Brier and Jean Carré sought a license to make glass after the French fashion, and to teach to English craftsmen the art of its manufacture, as practiced in Lorraine and Normandy. Elizabeth, always with an eye on to the main chance, made no difficulty, and joining forces with a rival licensee, Becker, set up in opposition to the English glassmakers in Sussex, and later at Stourbridge and Newcastle. The fact that the native workers openly confessed their inability to compete with the French craftsmen did not prevent their stirring up a strong opposition against them, which found vent in popular tumult, and in at least one instance, in a conspiracy to murder the workers, pillage their stores, and destroy their furnaces. There seems little doubt, however, that their presence must have influenced the quality of English glass, and given an impetus to its manufacture. So did the advent of political and religious refugees from the Low Countries and from Europe, and also, though of course to a far greater degree, the influx of French artisans in the 17th century, after the revocation of the famous Edict of Nantes. In spite of their efforts, however, it does not appear that the importation of fine Venetian glass was in any way checked. It continued indeed, on an extensive scale, for a long time thereafter. The most famous name in the history of Elizabethan glass manufacture is that of Jacob Vesselini, who came to London in 1575 and stayed for the remainder of his life, about 30 years. He obtained a patent giving him the monopoly of manufacturing glass after the Venetian style for 21 years. He set up his establishment in the Hall of the Crutched Friars, where the 8 Venetians had built their furnace in 1549, and there made glass of diverse sorts to drink in. There is little doubt as to his success, although, with one possible exception, no tangible evidence of it remains. But if one may judge by the very considerable outcry that arose at this period against permitting foreigners to practice the art of glass-making, to the detriment of native practitioners, he succeeded sufficiently well to arouse a strong feeling of jealousy. This was intensified by the traders who had hitherto sold imported Venetian glass, and the seamen who carried it in their vessels, and who now saw their livelihood menaced. The general public, too, showed itself greatly concerned over the great consumption of wood in the glass houses. Indeed, during this period, the wasting of the woods was a general complaint, wherever furnaces were set up. So strong was this feeling indeed, that in 1584, an act was passed against the making of glass by strangers and outlandish men, and for the preservation of wood spoiled by glass houses. And in 1589, the year after the Armada, it was proposed to reduce the number of glass houses from 15 to 4, transferring the rest to Ireland, where the loss of trees did not matter so much, the timber not being urgently needed, as in England, for the purpose of shipbuilding. One curious fact is that for a long time, from the 12th century at least in unbroken record, English window glass of a high order had been produced, as witness the windows of King's College Chapel at Cambridge, which date from 1515 to 1531. And it seems impossible to conceive that, with Venetian and Eastern glass to copy, the craftsmen who produced the windows should not have also turned their skill to the making of drinking vessels, particularly as the fashion for vessels of glass had strongly set in. It is a world to see in these our days, wherein gold and silver most aboundeth, how that our gentility, as loathing these metals, because of the plenty, do now generally choose rather the Venice glasses, both for our wine and beer than any of those metals, or stone wherein before time we have been accustomed to drink. The poorest also will have glass if they may, but sith the Venetian is somewhat too dear for them, they content themselves with such as are made at home of fern and burnt stone, but in fine all go one way, that is to shards at the last. On the other hand, when Sir Richard Mansell applied in 1624 for a patent to manufacture glass, and to train Englishmen in the art, it was opposed on the ground that 50 years before a similar patent had been granted to Jacob Vesselini, and that it had been altogether neglected, and very few Englishmen had been brought up in the art. Mansell in his reply stated that he himself had brought many strangers from beyond seas to instruct his fellow countrymen in making all sorts of glass: crystalline, Murano, spectacle glasses, and mirror plates. I have stated these facts in the early history of English glass at some length, not only for their intrinsic interest, but also to illustrate the curious fact that just as there is from Saxon times to 1550 a gap in the history of its manufacture, which no authenticated examples assist to fill, so from the accession of Queen Elizabeth to that of King Charles I, there exist today very few indisputable examples of the English glassblower's art at this period. And yet it is hardly possible to believe that they were not produced in considerable quantity. For in spite of specimens bearing the Tudor rose, an ornament, by the way, largely employed at a later date, and of others with detailed and more or less accredited histories, Elizabethan glass, so glibly spoken of by some collectors, is chiefly conspicuous by its absence. Happy, therefore, the collector who acquires even a dubious example. One famous specimen which may safely be assumed to be authentic is that from the British Museum collection. This drinking cup or goblet stands about 5.5 inches in height, and bears the initials GS, probably those of the person for whom it was made. The date, 1586, and the motto, "In God is all my trust." Experts generally concur in attributing it to Jacob Vesselini. 4 years after the Armada, Elizabeth granted to one Thomas Bowes a monopoly to make drinking glasses, to be as good, cheap, or better cheap than those imported from Venice. As to the success of his venture, history is silent. In the reign of her successor, that British Solomon James I, glassmaking seems, however, to have made considerable progress. For in 1610 a license was granted for the invention of coal-heated glasshouses, and in the following year Sir Edward Zouche expended no less a sum than £5,000 in erecting glasshouses in Lambeth and perfecting the production of the glass with sea coal. This change is a momentous one in the history of glassmaking, inasmuch as it became necessary to cover the pots, and this brought about various improvements. They are mainly associated with the name of Percival, and it is to be presumed that they included the introduction of oxide of lead into the frit in quantity, with the results of producing a more brilliant crystal than had yet been produced. From this time English glass began to acquire fame, and the industry became a definitely British art. One outcome of this change as the method of manufacture was that the industry became localized. The glass houses springing up in those districts where it was easy to obtain fuel, as in the coalfields, where the sand was of exceptional quality, as at Reigate, or where there was an abundance of clay suitable for making the pots, as at Stourbridge. One of the most interesting discoveries in connection with the history of the glass industry in England was made some 60 or 70 years ago, at the little Hampshire village of Buckled Wood. Excavations here brought to light fragments of glass, some clear, others with a greenish or bluish tinge, evidently portions of broken vessels of various kinds, drinking glasses, jugs, bottles, and so forth. These were in such quantity that it was evident chance had brought to light one of the old glass houses, which were founded in well-wooded districts, and kept going as long as sufficient wood remained to burn. We have seen how, in the beginning, English glassworkers were a nomad race. As the woods in one place were exhausted, they moved to fresh fields and forests new, much to the annoyance of the populace, who depended upon those woods for their household firing, and of the government, who sought to preserve them for the maintenance of the fleet. In 1615, a proclamation was made forbidding the use of wood for glass smelting, the furnaces being in future compelled to burn sea coal or charcoal or other fuel. The same ordinance prohibited the importation of foreign glass or the immigration of foreign glass workers. In the same year, Sir Richard Mansell, a man of considerable standing in the realm, who had been experimenting in glass-making with the aid of Venetian workmen, was granted a license for making glass with coal, and set up furnaces in London at Purbeck, Milford Haven, and Newcastle. It is a matter for regret that no product of his furnaces is known to exist today, a fact the more surprising in that his license was renewed at various times, and so covers a considerable stretch of the most interesting period of the art. At any rate, we find him petitioning in 1641 that he might be protected against persons importing glass from abroad, whereas he was paying a rent of £1,000 per annum for his monopoly. His name is mentioned as late as 1653, so that for nearly 40 years he controlled, more or less, the business of glass production in England. It is a matter for some congratulation, however, that Mansell employed, in some kind of managerial capacity in his Broad Street works, a certain James Howell, who enjoys the reputation of being one of the liveliest and most pleasing writers of the period. In the famous Howell's letters, Epistolae Hoelianae, which were published between 1645 and 1655, we have a delightful commentary on the events of his time, and incidentally a number of curious and useful sidelights on the conduct of glass manufacture, both in England and on the continent. It is said that Sir Kenelm Digby, of royalist fame, invented in 1632 the art of making glass bottles to contain the wine, which hitherto had been drawn straight from the wood. But fame which credits him with this discovery would seem to have forgotten that in Elizabeth's time ale was sold in glass bottles, and a quaint old volume excerpt, The English Housewife, refers in 1575 to round bottles with narrow necks for bottle ale, the corks being tied down with stout string. The Commonwealth, save for what may be gleaned from Howell's pages, adds but little to our knowledge of glass. The Puritans were perhaps more addicted to smashing it, in the form of stained glass windows, than manufacturing it for domestic utilities. But with the Restoration there came a great change. The then Duke of Buckingham, who appears, like others of his name, to have had a keen eye to the main chance, started a glass furnace at Greenwich. In 1663 he petitioned the king that he might be granted a license to make mirrors, he having been at great expense in finding out the art and mystery thereof, a manufactory not known heretofore used in England. A curious contradiction to Mantell's claim in 1620, and one which seems to imply that the Duke was by no means particular as to what he said provided he might gain his ends. There were numbers of competitors at the time, all claiming to be the inventors of crystal glass. The authorities, however, awarded the palm to one Thomas Tilson, who in 1663 was granted a patent in which he is described as the inventor of crystal glass. It appears clear that Tilson had produced a material of greater merit than any of his predecessors or contemporaries. It is probable that this material was lead glass, flint glass as it was and is still called. One point in support of this theory is that it was too brittle to be used in making vessels, and Tilson consequently confined himself to the manufacture of mirrors, windows for coaches, etc. Specimens of the work of this period may be found in many places. Country houses, mansions, halls, etc., throughout the country. At Hampton Court Palace there are, for example, several magnificent mirrors that testify to the skill of the craftsmen, Venetian and English, of this period. Some of the window glass is of the same date, and may be readily distinguished by its mauve tinge, a possible result of the action of light on the peroxide of manganese, which was one of the constituents. At a slightly later date, other glass houses were founded in Lambeth, Stourbridge, Newcastle on Tyne, and other places, notably in Surrey and Sussex. All this while, however, there was a great trade in imported Venetian glass, which the council was, time and again, petitioned to prohibit. Fortunately, both for the future of the art of glass-making in England, and for the cheapness of the quality of the ware, which was now in great demand, the efforts of the protectionists were unavailing. Much of our knowledge of the glass of the period is due to the discovery of the trading books and order sheets of one John Green, who seems to have dealt in imported glass, ordering from the Venetian furnaces vessels to his own specification and design. Fortunately, some specimens of these are still in existence, but it need hardly be said that examples of the 17th century, both home manufactured and imported, are of the extremest rarity. He would be a fortunate collector who should discover, say, a speckled emerald-covered beer glass, or a milk-white cruet, either with or without feet and ears of good handsome fashion. In point of shape, the Venetian and English glasses of this period differ very little. But there is considerable difference in the character of the metal. The glass from Venice is colder to the eye, whiter and softer than the English, which is more brilliant and of a peculiar steely luster, while it is far weightier, a fact probably due to the use of a considerable proportion of lead. The English glasses, too, are heavier in appearance, with stems thick and lumpy of the baluster type. Often, too, the bulbous stem is blown with a bubble, often of considerable size, a primitive attempt at ornamentation. Not unseldom a coin is inserted in the bulb of the stem, or the knob of the cover. One famous example of Caroline glass is the magnificent Posit Cup, in the possession of Miss Whitmore Jones, which is shown in Figure 2. This unmistakably dates from the time of Charles I, and is a genuine example of English art. It was probably, as to the design, copied from a Venetian model, but the texture of the glass and the weight of the piece are strong evidence of its English origin. With the accession of William, the craft was further stimulated by the importation of many models, and possibly craftsmen from the Low Countries. Speaking generally, however, the vessels of the reigns of William and of Anne are but improved specimens of those of Charles. Some, however, have spiral lines cut around the stems, and are, to this extent, the prototypes of the twisted stems of the 18th century. The illustration of a feeding cup in Figure 3 provides an excellent example of the work of this period. Its admirable shape and style and its exquisite workmanship will readily appeal not only to connoisseurs, but also to all who are capable of appreciating artistic merit. In Figure 5 we have portrayed the prototype of the modern tankard. Judging by the shape and style, it was probably an ale glass, but that it was intended rather as a specimen to be preserved is evidenced from the fact that a coin of the period has been blown into the base. Figure 6 is a photograph showing the coin. Such a piece has almost the value of a dated specimen, for though it was, of course, possible to insert a coin of any previous date, the reason for doing so is by no means obvious. It is hardly likely, for example, that anyone living in William's reign would have so enthusiastic a regard for Charles II as to cause a coin of that monarch to be embedded in a piece that he had made as an heirloom. This specimen is in the British Museum. His mark appears to the right of the photograph. The quaint glass panel seen in Figure 4 is an interesting relic of the attention paid to glassworking at this period. The portrait is that of old Rowley, Charles II himself, and the piece was in all probability made at Greenwich, possibly in commemoration of his visit. It was taken from a house in Purfleet and is now in the National Collection. The revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685 gave a vast impetus to glassworking as to other crafts. This measure and the terrible persecutions which followed it cost France a number, variously estimated at from 250,000 to 600,000, of her best citizens. Great numbers of these immigrants settled in England, and founded in their new home the industries which had become famous in the country of their birth. Among them came glassworkers from Paris, Lorraine, and other parts of France, who were deservedly famous for their skill in their craft. Coming as they did at a time when the discovery of the brilliant so-called flint glass gave to English glassware a distinction possessed by no other. It is small wonder that the next half-century saw such developments in the art of glass manufacture in England, that English glass became superior to all other kinds, even to the famous glass of Bohemia, which seemed dull and lustreless beside it. For these reasons, the close of the 17th century is an epoch in the history of English glass, and the period which followed it saw the art of glass manufacture in England attain its zenith. It is therefore with 18th century glass that we are chiefly concerned, and as the great bulk of 18th century glass consisted of drinking glasses, a great portion of our space will be devoted to these. At the outset, some attempt at classification is desirable. We may refer to the reader to the very exhaustive list of varieties which that great authority, Mr. Albert Hartshorne, has made in his standard work on the subject. For our purpose it will be sufficient, however, to make a broad and simple division of drinking glasses into wine glasses, ale and beer glasses, and cordial or spirit glasses. It is the custom, too, to draw a distinction between the rude vessels made for common household or tavern use, and the finer and more highly finished examples designed for the use of better class people. Here, however, the distinction is rather one of quality than of kind. The three great groups to which we have referred fall into various classes according to the diversity of shape and bowl, and stem, and to a less degree, of foot. The bowls are variously funnel-shaped, with straight sides or waisted, that is, with the sides curved inward to form a waist, bell-shaped, and OG or double OG shaped, the last named showing in section the OG curve, so widely employed by the architect for his mouldings. The stems are of two great classes, drawn stems or stuck stems. The former are parts of the same lump of molten glass of which the bowl is formed. The latter consist of a separate piece fused into the bowl. As regards shape, stems may be plain rods, rods with knobs, rib-twisted, faceted, air-twisted, air-drawn, or a peg-twisted. We shall deal with each variety in its appropriate place. With regard to the foot, the generality were folded. That is to say, the edge of the rim was turned under to form a fold or welt, so that the glass stands on the rim, and not on the flat of the foot. Apart from this, the only variations are those bearing on the flatness of the foot and its diameter. In old glasses, the feet were never quite flat. There is always a perceptible slope from the center to the rim, and very often the central portion rose up in a dome. The foot was also wider in comparison with the width of the bowl than in the modern top. The decoration is of two kinds, engraved and cut. The character of the engraving is little to the credit of the native designer or craftsman. Indeed, both as regards artistic design or skillful execution, English glass ornamentation is distinctly inferior to that of continental pieces. The usual design is the rose, at first heraldic and conventional, and then more and more natural, with at first a butterfly, which gradually dwindled to a moth, and then finally disappeared. Other designs are based upon the nature of the liquids drunk, or refer to politics, domestic or business affairs, or to some famous personage. The largest group of designs is associated with Jacobism, Charlie over the waterism as someone has wittily called it. In rare cases these bore a portrait. More commonly the emblem selected is the use of two buds, the latter explained as referring to the two sons of James II, or to the two sons of the old pretender, Charles Edward, of Charlie's My Darling fame, and Henry, who died in Rome in 1807 as Cardinal York. And at the end of that chapter, I'm going to call it a night. If you'd like to pick it up where we left off and take a look at the examples that are referred to in the text, you can, as always, find it in Project Gutenberg at the link in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you to get a restful night. New episodes are released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get your new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Sweet Night and Friends by Kumiku. Check out more of their work on their website, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.